Darci Zillman from the Kosciuszko County Soil and Water Conservation District. Today I want to talk to you about freshwater mussels. Freshwater mussels are a really important species to talk about, especially when you're looking at water quality. So we're going to look at them closely and see what they tell us about the water. So I'm going to start off with some statements though. I want you to figure out if I'm saying something true or something false. So here's our first one. Mussels are found on every continent in the world. If you said false, you're correct. Mussels are some of the most widespread species in the world, and they're found on every continent except one, and that's Antarctica. So that's close to being a true statement, but not quite. Even though they're some of the most widespread species, though, they're some of the most endangered ones as well. And that's one reason that we would like to study them. The next one. During the late 1800s, mussels were used to make buttons. That's true. We had button factories along many of our rivers. They would harvest the mussels and open the shells up and punch holes in the shells and make buttons from it. So if you're ever around any antique clothing, look at the buttons. If they look kind of pearly, they're probably made from freshwater mussels. The advent of plastics, though, really shut down the mussel button factories. So now all of our buttons are made from plastics. Mussels can live to be 150 years old. That's a long time. That's also true. Not all species can live that long, but many do. You can tell how old a mussel is by counting the rings on its shell, kind of like a tree. True or false? If you said true, you're right. Mussels, as they get older, put a ring on the outside edge of their shells. So we can get an indication of how old that mussel is by looking at those rings. Mussels and mollusks are words for the same thing. That one's false. All mussels are mollusks, but not all mollusks are mussels. That's like saying all German shepherds are dogs, but not all dogs are German shepherds. So mussels are in the mollusk family. The Tippecanoe River, which flows right through our county, is one of the best rivers in the world for mussel species. That's also true. That's another reason we like to study them here, and it gives us an indication of how good the water is in that river. Mussels use a foot to move across the bottom of a stream. That's true. Who knew mussels had feet? Well, they only have one, and it's not a foot they can run races with, but it is an appendage that helps them move in the water, often looking for deeper water. Native mussels in the United States must spend part of their lives living on a fish. That also is true, and that's one of the things that has put them in danger. So we're going to talk about some other features of the mussels and some other things that have put them at risk. So Eagle Creek is home to a lot of mussels. We often find them there when we're looking for macroinvertebrates. The most common one we're finding is the three-ridged mussel. So Eagle Creek must be a pretty good place for three-ridged mussels to live. If you have a nice clear water, you can see the mussels here in the creek. You'll also sometimes see a trail that they leave behind. They use that one foot to push themselves along the water, often looking for deeper water. And on a nice clear day, you can see those trails at the bottom of the water in the stream bed. So this is a freshwater mussel. Let's look at some of its features to understand how it exists and why it's endangered. So mussels are bivalves, so that means they have two distinct halves. Mussels also have teeth. So if you look here in the hinge area, you see these little ridges, and they fit together nicely. So the teeth aren't used for any chewing purposes, but they're used to just help keep the shells together in case they get in any kind of strong current. If you look at the inside of that mussel, the inside is really a nice pearly white. This is called the nacre. This is why they were used for buttons. It's a really pretty surface. Not all mussels are white on the inside though, and we'll show you some of those later. Mussels also have that one foot. So they are oriented this way in the water often, and the foot comes out of the bottom, and it just scoots that mussel along a riverbed, often in search for that deeper water. Mussels are filter feeders. They eat through a siphon. They're constantly pumping water in and out of their bodies. So they eat detritus, decomposing organic matter, planktons in the water. So they filter feed. Now that's also one of the things that's put them in danger. If we have some kind of pollutant coming downstream, it's going to pull that right into its body, and it can do some damage or even kill the mussel. So filter feeding is how they eat. Their reproduction system has a lot of steps in it that also put them in danger. So let's say this is the female sitting in a stream. She has eggs inside of her shell that hatch inside of her. Once they hatch, they're called Glaucidia. Glaucidia are very tiny, and they have little hooks on the outsides of their shells. After they develop in mom for a while, the mother mussel does something kind of unusual and unique. She puts out a fishing lure. So each mussel has its own fishing lure that it can put out. So why do you have different fishing lures in your tackle box? Well, it's to catch different fish, right? That's how it is in the mussel world too. Each mussel has its own fish that it's hoping to attract. So the mussel puts its fishing lure out. Some are made to look like small fish, some like frogs, some are even on long tendrils that kind of float in the water. She puts the fishing lure out, and hopefully the right fish comes along and starts to nibble at it. Once it starts nibbling, the mom spits the kids out or expels them right in the fish's face. Those baby mussels, or Glaucidia, have to hook a ride on that fish, usually in the gill area. This is a host relationship, and the mussels don't usually hurt the fish, and the fish doesn't even know they're there, but they do live on that fish for a period of time. Once they've matured enough, those hooks start to dissolve. Once they dissolve, the mussel drops off into the river. So all parts of that reproduction cycle have to work just right. The mother mussel must be in the right place. She has to have a good fishing lure. The right fish has to come along. The Glaucidia have to hook a ride on that fish, and then that fish has to take them to a good place, because that's where they'll spend the rest of their lives. If one part of that doesn't work well, those mussels probably aren't going to make it. So survivability in the mussel world is pretty low, just because of all those steps that have to take place. Another reason that we study mussels is because they're good water quality indicators. They cannot get away from a problem. So if we have a community of mussels in the stream and they start to disappear, it causes us to start looking at reasons why that's happening. We often call mussels the aquatic canary in the coal mine. Do you know why coal miners used to take canaries into the coal mines? Well, they were very sensitive to the air, and if the bird got sick or it fell over dead in the cage, they knew that they had to get out of there because the air wasn't good. That's kind of how we look at mussels in our streams and rivers. They're good water quality indicators. If they're there, that tells us the water's probably pretty good. If they start to disappear, we may have a problem to deal with. So there are several things that have put our Indiana mussels in danger. One we talked about, because they can't get away from any problem coming down river, that's a problem for them. If we have a big rainstorm and there's a lot of sediment coming into the water, it can bury that mussel so it can't do any of its body functions. That's a problem. Also, there are things that like to eat mussels. Can you think of some mammals that live in or around the water that might want to eat a mussel? The ones that I think of are muskrats and river otters and raccoons. So they are a food source for some animals. Another risk factor is biological. We have another species of mussels that is not native. It's an invasive species, and it came to us from Asia in the ballast water of big ships. They release that ballast water into the Great Lakes, and they release these zebra mussels with them. Now zebra mussels are in most of the water bodies here in Indiana and around our country. The problem they cause is they don't have to spend part of their time living on a fish like our native mussels. Because of that, they reproduce very quickly, and they colonize on almost every surface they come in touch with. So if you know anyone, or if you have a boat on one of our lakes, you don't like zebra mussels very well. They attach to piers and the boats, and they attach to our native species. They also overfilter the water, so there's not much food left for our native mussel species. So zebra mussels are pushing our native species out and causing their numbers to decrease. And we're still not sure of the best way to control them, but we're working on it. Some of our Indiana freshwater mussels have really interesting names. Some are very descriptive of what the shell looks like. So I want to show some of those to you today. The first one I want to show you is this one. Now some people see this, and when they hear the name, they say, oh yeah, so this is called a pigtail. Does that look like a pig's toe to you? The next one actually has the name of an organ that we have. So does that look like an organ that you can think of that's in your body? Well, this is called the kidney shell mussel. This mussel looks a lot like the kidney shell, but if you were holding it, you would know the difference right away. It's very light and the shell is very thin. That's why it has the name the giant floater. This is a mussel that could be dangerous if you stepped on it. This is called the heel splitter. It has a really sharp upper edge on it. Now we get to some of the fun names. This one is named because of its physical features. Not only does it have a lot of bumps on its shell, but the inside is purple. So this is called the purple warty back. This is another one that has a lot of bumps on the outside, but the inside isn't purple, it's white. This is the pimpleback. And then this is my favorite one. Probably the least flashy one that I have in my collection, but it's the most rare one. This is the clubshell mussel. The second most viable population of clubshell mussels in the whole world is right here in Kosciuszko County in our Tippecanoe River. So this one is really special and one that we really like to study when we're here. So hopefully, just by learning a little bit more about our freshwater mussels, you find them fascinating too. They're great water quality indicators, and they're good to look for when we're looking for those macroinvertebrates. But be careful, here in Indiana, all of our native species are protected, and you can't collect them. So have fun looking for those freshwater mussels next time you go to the stream.